Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and pleasure of having Tanner Jones with Consultwebs back. Good to see you again, Tanner.
Yeah, same to you, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about technology and automation, things like that today. And I'm excited to delve into that because we just wrapped up a month of March. I'm doing this at the end of March, and it's funny to look at some lawyers are really like adapting and gravitating towards this automation and AI and different tools, and then some of them are just not ready for it. And some are worried that it's going to, kill the relationship building with their clients and everything, and referrals, and that it's not going to give good client service, and that it's going to be too cold, too robotic. Mm-hmm. What do you say to firms that say that?
Well, part of it is recognizing that, your instincts, some of whether your bullish motivations or your hesitancies likely have some merit. And it's important to recognize that every firm is starting or at least looking at tech through a different lens. They have a different operation, likely different practice areas, different firm size. And so that's where I would tell you to start, is really consider where are you? Where have you been as a law firm? What's your culture? Where are you going? A lot of those are some of those just most important business criteria that you ask yourself: your mission, your vision, your values, and reflect on those. And how does tech speak to that? More importantly, how can tech help you live that out? And begin to think through it through that lens. There's some law firms out there that want to create the McDonald's of law firms, and they want to have the most, scalable, efficient process possible. And I think, naturally those types of firms, they're going to be most inclined to jump right in, both feet in. They're going to fail forward. And that's another mindset of, a lot of law firms hate the idea of failing or having to run into, bottlenecks or issues. Well, anytime you're implementing tech, you're going to have some bottlenecks. Likely you're going to run through some issues to find the efficiency, to find the smooth path. So for those firms, Ken, I would say, continue to embrace it as you have been. For the ones who are more hesitant, that's the one I'd like to take a quick moment to speak to directly, because it's coming whether or not you are going to use it. And if you want to continue to serve your client well and continue to be seen as modern and relevant, well, there's always going to be a certain level of change in tech that you have to implement. But I would encourage you to look at the areas behind the scenes. If you embrace and really value the relationships that you're establishing with clients, and you believe that's really one of your unique value propositions, is to build connectivity and relationship, maintain that relationship throughout, and that's what drives future business, by all means, I believe in that too. And I think that's exactly what you should continue to do, and not allow tech to get in the way of that. If you see a concern of tech getting in the way and feeling too cold or robotic in communication, then by all means, don't implement that. You look at behind the scenes in your operation. How do you get from A to Z, whether it's, drafting motions, medical chronology, or, whatever else in the operations behind the scenes? That's where you should look first and foremost, and continue to embrace the relationship aspect of managing a law firm. Because again, as mentioned earlier, every firm's different. You're going to have different starting points in tech.
Yeah. Talking about tech. So I hear this thrown around a lot, a tech stack. What's your tech stack? Mm-hmm. So tell us, what is a tech stack? I mean, what's the definition of what's included, what's not included, tech stack?
Yep. So a tech stack can be different from one firm to the next, but the whole concept of the tech stack is that it's you're layering on technology together, almost like, you're building a brick wall. It's all going to harmoniously fit together. And that's ultimately what you're after with all of your tech, so that everything's integrated. It's quote unquote talking to one another, pushing data, pulling data, so that if you're updating one platform like your case management software, then it can also feed in those updates into whatever other reporting dashboard where you need to know the cases signed and converted, etc. So historically, you think, as 10 plus years ago, a law firm may have email running out of Outlook, for example, and then they may have their own case, the Needles case management, which historically didn't talk to anything. It was kind of, isolated off on its own. And then they may have had several other individual communication tech stacks or technical components of their business, but none of which spoke to one another. So there was a lot of inefficiency historically in how you operated multiple platforms. You've heard the concept junk in, junk out. If you didn't have a receptionist or a paralegal that entered the right data here, then naturally it was never going to feed into this other platform that you have. So the idea of running an efficient tech stack today is, what are you currently using to run your law office? Do you have a lead management software in place? Are you tracking phone calls that are coming through and utilizing call tracking software? Do you have a case management software? All of these, the software that you're actively using, your teams are using, a tech stack is really focusing on how can we ensure that they're all connected to one. Often it's through API connection, where you can have programmers get in and make sure that they can speak to one another, push data and pull data. But that's the whole concept, is making sure that everything's talking to one another and you're running as efficient as a business as possible through the valuable technology that's available to us.
Yeah. And so another thing with this AI and automation is, and I've seen this, and this is where I understand AI better for me, is in marketing. So what are you seeing? What are you seeing? What are you suggesting that firms, how can they use AI and automation, in my opinion, level the playing field and be able to play with the big boys who's got, the big TV spenders, the big billboard guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really important piece. I mean, you can look at how AI is applied in virtually every asset or aspect of your business. You mentioned marketing, and we'll start there, but you also have intake. You have your operations, you have client relationships. There are several different facets of the business where AI can begin to be plugged in. But from a marketing standpoint, there's a lot changing. I would tell you to look at it always through the lens of quality and uniqueness. How can we leverage AI technology to help us stand out above the rest? Sometimes that is through having unique content on your site that no other competitor has on the site, on their sites. Sometimes it's a completely different angle that you haven't taken, and you can utilize large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, Grok, whatever, to go in and ideate. I think from a marketing standpoint, ideation is, a lot of people love that aspect of creativity. And there are some people who resist using large language models because they want to be able to, this needs to be unique to them. It needs to be creative. And they believe creative comes from the soul, from the heart. Well, what's awesome is that you can apply your own creativity and then challenge large language models to give you different angles of that, or ask it and challenge, what am I missing? Well, how could consumers respond to this? What are the risks involved? What's a better angle that gets attention? Constantly challenging status quo and utilizing an LLM like you would an assistant, a marketing assistant, is a powerful tool. Whether you're a lawyer who, may spend a couple hours in marketing every single month, or whether you're an active marketer in the legal profession and spending all of your days focusing on this, using it for ideation is an incredible tool. But then it comes into today, what's being rewarded in both Google search and AI overviews and large language model results is the whole concept of who is the authority, who is known as being able to speak with confidence around this particular subject matter. And if you are not actively pushing out your voice, your personal brand, and your law firm's brand around the topics of your practice areas, then there's a huge opportunity there to leverage AI. Start by, asking it to compare you as a commercial truck accident lawyer to the next lawyer down the road who has a billboard for trucking, and start to get an understanding of how these large language models are comparing you and contrasting you against competition, and look through the cited sources. In those cited sources within these large language models where they're gathering that data, it's going to show you exactly what information they're pulling.
Yeah.
They're pulling it because you're a 40-year veteran and you have so many number of verdicts in trucking, and it's referenced in this article, and this article. Well, the only way you do that or replicate that is, one, you have to be a good lawyer with a good history for one, that's a valuable asset to marketing. But the next piece is actually utilizing the large language models to tell you where to go get those citations, where to go get referenced, where to go get quoted. And that's the game today with AI when it comes to marketing, is ultimately how can we continue to level up the playing field when it comes to our authority around these very particular specific practice areas. So
Yeah,
again, Ken,
yeah,
I mean, I'd be curious to hear from you on the mastermind side. When you
yeah,
look at these buckets of your business, marketing,
yeah,
intake,
yeah.
operations, where are you seeing firms pour the resources from an AI standpoint into most?
On intake, it's listening to the calls, and they got several companies out there, Speed.ai, the call rail, they're listening, and they got using AI to tell you whether or not you're losing calls, or you're not, your guy's not doing, or gal's not doing a good job. I think that's like super duper important, because that's where you spend all this money, and if you don't, you need to squeeze all the lemon out of the juice, right? I mean, because if you don't, you're wasting money, and most lawyers are not signing up as many cases as they think. They think they're signing up all they want, and they're not. And when
Mhm.
we've proven it time and time again. And when people go in and get audits or do this or implement some of this AI tools, they find out real quick it ain't as great as they thought it was, and they're
Mhm.
leaving money. If you're losing 10 cases a month because of that, or 2 cases a month, your average fee's 10,000. That's $1 million a year, you know. And the next thing, I think the big bucket is we're seeing used is in chronologies and demands, a lot of that. And then you see things like HONA and case status, where they're using them to communicate and have open portals with their clients to make everything so that they can do net promoter scores, so they can see whether or not the clients are happy. And if they find out early that they're not, then they can jump in there and fix it, turn the lemonade. And then we're seeing, believe it or not, even in negotiating, we've got some at the AI for PI conference. A guy showed them and actually went through and trained. We had like 50 lawyers and told them how to create a gem from Gemini. And then people put different people in there, like, and some of the lawyers are putting Chris Voss, who was like the master negotiator,
Right. Yeah.
and then making their associates feed in their demands and the response from the insurance company, and getting advice on how to negotiate to get the most money from the adjusters. I mean,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So they're using it as a thought, partner in the marketing. It's just crazy. I mean, we use Opus. We do a
Video.
podcast, and we take
Yes.
Opus and AI, and it clips out 6 clips, pushes them out on Facebook. I've got some lawyers that are taking what's it called, SEMrush or RFs,
Mhm.
AREFs, whatever they
Mhm.
call it, taking their analytics from that, feeding it into ChatGPT or Claude, and asking it to look at it, so that when they have meetings with their SEO people, they can figure out if they're dropped in certain keyword searches, or what they need to work on. And so that helps them hold SEO people accountable. And they're using it to come up with ideas for, like yesterday, I was doing a presentation on how you can use a book to really give you authority and market your practice. And one of the guys there said, "Well, I don't have a book."
Mm.
And he said, I'm not a good writer. I said, "Well, just go to Claude," because he was using Chat GPT. I said, "But Claude's better at writing stuff." I said, "And here's your chat." I said, "I'll give you the title." I said, "The 7 fatal mistakes that accident victims in West Virginia make, and how to avoid every one of them." I said, "And tell it to write it in the voice of Dan Kennedy and Ken Hardison." Before I got through with my speech, he had a 55-page book with a cover, and it went there, had the 7 fatal mistakes, how to avoid them. And of course, he's going to have to edit it some.
Sure.
But
Sure.
and when I did these back 20 years ago, it took me several weeks to write
Mm.
a little book like that. And it also ran it through Hemingway app, which is
Smart.
and put it on a sixth grade level, so that, because it's going to consumers, right? So it did all that in like less than 10 minutes. And while I was sitting there still doing my presentation about how to use a book, to leverage a book. But here at Pima, we use it to do the whole marketing schedule for doing social media. I mean, what's got to go out when, da da da. I mean, it's the whole calendar, the whole planet. We just got through with our strategic quarterly meeting this, and we're going to we got the fireflies taking the notes. We're going to take that. It'll give you some action items, but then we're going to take that and run it through ChatGPT, and it'll give us more action items. So, I mean, you can just use it in so many ways. I mean, it's just, we're, at PILMA, I'm really pushing them. Like, one of my 5 main things this year is to automate something, at least one thing every month.
That's it.
Yeah, every quarter, excuse me, every quarter, something big. I want them all using it, but like actually one project every quarter, we're going to automate something, whether we're using AI or we're using Zapier or whatever we're using. They've been very cooperative and very energized to do it. Unlike a lot of, but I got a young crowd and they accept it. But
They embrace it.
all
Yeah.
firm owners, a lot of the older people are just saying, let's screw this. This is the way I've always done it. It's the way I'm going to do it. But it's supposed to be a podcast with me interviewing you, though. But I mean, I'm just telling you, I'm seeing so much of this, man.
That's it.
It's blowing my mind, and yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I
Well,
mean,
that's why I asked you, Ken, because I mean, naturally, you have a unique advantage in talking with personal injury lawyers with boots on the ground running very successful practices across the country, and you're hearing from them literally monthly, if not weekly. And so you have greater perspective than virtually anyone in it. But I want to hit for your listeners, hit on the important piece there, because a lot of what you're talking about, everything virtually that you mentioned, are not new concepts. They are often sound practices, from the marketing elements you talked about to just sound good intake, to operations, to being able to negotiate better, ask better questions, challenge the opposition, do better research, take significant loads of medical records and summarize them in a succinct way so that you can get from A to Z faster. That's the big point of all of this. And if you're sitting there as a managing attorney and you have decades under your belt and you don't have the appetite to jump in and start testing technology, utilize the people around you and your staff members, your team who have ownership. They're championing certain areas of your business, your intake manager, your marketing director, whoever's running your operations. Challenge them just as you did, Ken, on what is that one quarterly improvement that we're gonna leverage tech and we're gonna implement one area of your day to day, week to week, that's going to streamline what you do and make you bigger, better, and faster, or more efficient, more nimble.
yeah,
And I've seen it within our operations. We've spent enormous hours reconciling ad spends across multiple accounts, which eat up significant time, team time, manual time, where we've implemented new AI software today to be able to reconcile and turn what used to take 20 hours into 5 minutes, being
yeah.
able to implement. And so what do you do then? You take your savings, you take your efficiencies, and you apply them back into your business. Where can that intake manager now spend more time rescuing leads because they're not chasing their tail and being overwhelmed? They've implemented software to create more efficiency and give them more capacity. That's the name of the game. Every firm's on a different pace. Comparison is the thief of joy. And so, really, really focus on your own operations, your own business, and don't necessarily feel like you have to reinvent a wheel. Look at your existing processes and implement software that's going to get there faster from A to Z.
So this is something that I hadn't heard a lot talk about. I want to ask you is like, and we know this, that a lot of firms, we had one of our masterminds that he was getting audited. And so they sent his 3 biggest competitors. They did phone calls and they did phone calls to his office. And then they did, what is it? They filled out the form. What do you call it? The website lead
Yeah,
form.
like a contact form or a chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Two up. One of them was upon it within an hour. The other two never responded. And he responded in like 5 minutes. So he was happy with that. But
Mm-hmm.
my question is, most firms are losing a lot of money. What can you do to, what's out there technology wise to make sure you don't miss these lead forms
Mm-hmm.
and calls, but really these lead forms where somebody fills out something or somebody does something on a website or does something on a Google, a Facebook ad or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just wasted money, you know.
It's wasting money. You said it earlier. They spend a ton of money. Attorneys are spending a lot of money to make the phone ring, but are often neglecting, that area of intake and what more could be done to convert. I would ask, if you were to call your own firm, last night at 8 p.m., are you getting the same experience that you would if you called in during lunch or 2 p.m.? And if it's inconsistent, and if there's a reason it's inconsistent, then obviously that's a place to start. There are a number of groups out there today that are offering more like intake and call service type offerings for law firms, and many of which built specifically for law firms. We've seen Smith.ai doing really well, Ruby, and I hate to even mention names because there are a number of really good groups out there. But what's really cool that I'm seeing is that many of them are starting to use more of a hybrid of AI with a human receptionist. And so if you're concerned about turning your phones over to an independent company, or even more, turning it over to AI, well, they have a lot of checks and balances in place to really protect your reputation and your business. But specifically with like contact forms, there are a lot of firms that see both phone calls and contact forms that come through as junk. They're solicitations. There's zero interest in hiring a lawyer. And the beauty with being able to leverage a call center is to be able to take a lot of that, it's just grunt work, being able to call and filter leads, make sure that you've vetted and pursuing potential new clients appropriately with speed. A lot of firms should absolutely consider outsourcing that to a third-party group, especially groups that are leveraging the AI plus human receptionist hybrid. I've seen some early good success with that approach. And I would tell you that you mentioned Speed AI earlier, Ken. You've seen a number of law firms using Speed AI. And for your listeners, this is a software that's been created to assess your phone calls. So it's vetting the phone calls, listening for buzzwords, big keywords that imply a notable case. It's also listening maybe for questions not being asked specifically versus questions being asked. And it's ultimately trying to rise cream to the top so that as an intake manager or a managing director, you can quickly hop in this dashboard and rescue leads that should be converted. And that's really the concept, is they help rescue leads. And I've seen firsthand one firm, relatively low case volume, increase their cases by two a month. It was approximately 20% increase in cases signed. Another firm on a completely different level, crazy high volume, I'm talking hundreds of cases signed on a monthly basis on average, implemented it in the first month, saw 15% more cases signed because of the leads that were rescued. You can't expect your intake team or a third party group to be hitting 10 out of 10 every time. They're humans. They're going to miss questions. They're going to not have that extra cup of coffee that morning. They're going to fail in certain instances. And the question is, if that's $1 million case, do you have a process in place to catch that? Most firms say no. And Ken, that's really where it comes down to, is if you can implement software that starts to rescue cases and help you increase by 10, 12, 15 plus percent, that is a noteworthy piece of software, my friend.
Yeah. So this is something that I'm playing with now. So, data, I always say, I hear in these masterminds, some of our 8-figure groups, the guys that do 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 million, they're all about the data, the data, the data. And what I'm seeing now, and I want to ask you what you think about it, is, what data do you need and how do you take it and put it in AI and get some kind of feedback of what's going good, what's doing this, and can AI do that? Can you take like your data, your marketing data, and take that and analyze it? Because I know the basics about marketing and I know all, certain things, but when it gets into the data,
Mm-hmm.
and especially online data, I'm kind of not, that's above my pay grade. So I would need some help with that. So what would you suggest? What are you seeing people do? What would you do? What do y'all do? Because I'm sure you're looking at data.
Well, certainly. And like we have, Consultwebs has what we call our law eval dashboard, which is an analytics dashboard for our clients. And certainly that's an all-in-one interface to be able to see how are my rankings, my traffic, my visibility, my lead flow, my AI rankings, all of that front and center. There are a number of groups that have analytical software like that. Lawmatics, I believe, that comes to mind. It's a very data focused dashboard that's extraordinarily intuitive and allows you to plug in your conversion data, your analytics data, and get insight that you don't necessarily know to ask for. And that's really what you're getting at, Ken, I believe, is how can you leverage AI to coach you on things that you don't even know to be asking, or data
Right.
sets you don't know to be comparing. And so from that end, part of that is, if you're wanting to do it on your own, then there's an experimentation process to this. I would start by making sure I have an enterprise account, a closed account where, presumably that data is not being shared to train large language models. We are Consultwebs extraordinarily protective of data and any kind of personal identifiable information, and you want to be very cautious of that for your listeners. That being said, an enterprise account or a closed account, we use Gemini for that under the Google roof. And you can start to look at what data are you looking at today? What metrics matter most in your business? For most business owners, it's signed cases, it's number of potential new clients coming in the door. And I'm sure there are a number of other data sets that you're looking at, but boiling it down simply, it starts with having history. What I would like to do is get a sense if I have multiple years worth of data and I can feed it in the number of leads compared to the number of potential new clients, compared to the number of signed clients, and I have lead origin sources associated with all of those leads, just that data alone, Ken, would blow your mind in what it's going to tell you. You can ask it, assume I'm ignorant from a business standpoint, position yourself as a chief marketing officer with the whole goal of using this data to help me attract more leads and convert more into clients. Here's my practice area. We include all these lead sources. Help me understand my most valuable lead sources. Help me understand seasonalities within the business. Are there ideas to how to, be proactive to avoid dips or volatility based on the historical data? What other questions should I be asking based on this data? I'm just spitballing there, but that's the experimental part of feed it the data, have it prompt you for good questions, but also challenge it for the questions that matter most to you. And, if you want to get really serious about it, there are technicians, data technicians. We just hired an AI engineer last year to help Consultwebs, a dedicated tech group, do just what we're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's so important. I've hired a guy that does monthly trainings for our masterminds just on AI, how to use AI in their law firms, how to use it effectively, how to get the people to buy in and all that stuff. So we're getting close to the end. So if you had one tool that you would tell somebody you need to implement that would make a big change, what would that tech tool be?
Well, I would point back to speed.ai. It's a sexy tool right now, and it's proven itself and its ability to objectively help you sign more business based on the leads you're already getting. And we've went round and round on that concept in this conversation, and it's not for any other reason other than we see it being an obvious way law firms can grow their business without spending another dollar in marketing, but just simply being able to convert more of what they're getting. So that's one area. But beyond that, if you don't have a good handle on your analytics, on your data, specifically knowing what sources are producing leads and cases for you, then start with the lead management software. Many of you probably already have a case management software where once they sign up, you're running that client through that software. But the step before that, all the leads that are coming in your door, having a system to be able to market to those individuals on a regular basis, utilize the data to tell you what's working, what's not. That type of software is great. Again, I'm hesitant to endorse anyone, but I'll tell you, there's Captora, Lead Docket. I mentioned Lawmatics earlier, Clio Grow. Again, a number of groups out there. You can utilize ChatGPT or any other LLM to help it diagnose which one's best for you and your operations.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a game changer. I think you hit it right. It all starts at intake because you want to squeeze all the juice you can, then you make more money, then you can take the other money and spend on other things like marketing and whatever. But
bingo.
But you gotta go. Well, I call it the low hanging fruit.
That's always the best place to start.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Ken, if you don't mind, I'd like to make one other point that's less tech focused, but certainly very relevant. And it's more from a leadership standpoint. You've been in this industry and serving personal injury lawyers and other lawyers for a number of decades now, and you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of change. But I would venture to guess you've seen more change in the last 1 to 2 years than you've seen in the history of helping law firms over these decades. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I was on another podcast this earlier, and that was what I said. The last 2 years, I've seen there's been more change, more disruption than they have the first 40 that I practiced. Yes.
So we have to recognize that we are in an unprecedented time. And I don't say that lightly. We're in uncharted waters from a leadership, from a management standpoint, we are pushing more change on our team than they've ever experienced in history. And we need to recognize that. The whole concept of change management and building a culture that is excited about change, that they're accountable to change, that, let's be real, if there's hesitancy or reluctance for change, there are conversations had and there's conflict that's had in an effort to make the business better. Not everyone's willing to necessarily look into that corner right now that I've observed, and it's here, regardless of whether you want to turn a blind eye to it. We experience it here at Consultwebs. I mean, the whole idea of digital is change itself. That is constant, but we're feeling it. And I read a study just recently that over half of your employees are done. They're exhausted. They're burnout. They are done with change. They're done with the fear of the unknown, of what's coming, because the news does not help, with mindset and frame of mind coming into the job every single day. And so the last thing I'm leaving you, Ken, and your listeners, is let's recognize that as leaders. Let's be some of the first to stand tall, to build a culture of change management, to know what too much change is based on your culture, to understand, what's just enough, and continue to challenge status quo there, because that's where you're going to make more money doing that. You're going to have a successful business, but more importantly, you're going to be able to serve your team. Your team's going to serve your clients well if you can really get that piece right.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I was speaking earlier this week, and I said, if you can explain to them their purpose underneath the change and then ask for their feedback, you still going to have some naysayers, but I think if they understand why you're doing it, what is it, the why, maybe they've got a better idea. And if they don't, then we're going with mine. But the deal is, I think it's the fear of the unknown, but I also think here comes something else that's not really going to help me personally. It's going to make my job harder. If you can prove to them, show to them, it's going to make it easier, that they'll be able to do more, they'll be able to be happier. And it will do that. What it's going to do is going to increase, AI is going to increase the average employee's productivity by probably 4 to 10 times. I mean, it can depend on the job, right? But I'd say 4 to 10 times. And that means you got to fire them. This means they can do more work, you can grow and not have to replace, they just got more capacity. So I agree with you, though. So if people want to get up with you, Tanner, and talk some more about this, how's the best way, my friend?
Yeah, you can find us at consultwebs.com, or just go to LinkedIn, search me up, Tanner Jones. I'd love the opportunity to speak to you about where your digital strategy is heading, and if you are, in fact, prepared for the AI world that we're living in.
Yeah, well, thank you. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.